So Bryan, let's jump into the position groups, and we'll talk about the guys more individually within those groups. I want to start with the defensive line. We'll start with the big boys. Obviously, the star of this group is Gabriel Rubio. You mentioned him already. But what does the rest of this class bring to the table at the defensive line? Where do you see them? You mentioned that they're high ceiling kids. And Gabriel Rubio again is the star. So maybe start with him and then kind of work your way through the class and let us know what you think of this group.
So my grading scale basically is A, B, C, D, and F essentially, and A is elite. I mean, top 5. This is as good as it gets. B is outstanding. It's a top 15 caliber class. C is, it's good. It's a top 25 at that position type of group. And then obviously D and F is we don't need to talk about because there were no D's and F's in this class. The defensive line I gave a B minus. Again, it's a top 15 group right now. It is sort of at the bottom of that top 15, and the reason for that is kind of what we were talking about earlier. This position more than any other is filled with low floor, high upside players.
Right.
And, you look at it starts with Gabriel Rubio. Now, he is the opposite of that. Gabriel is a high floor, high ceiling guy. High floor meaning that, his dad was an NFL player. He's very technically advanced. He knows how to play the game. He's big. He's strong. Great motor. He's a kid. This will kind of tell you what you need to know about Gabriel Rubio. He showed up at Notre Dame's camp 2 years ago, already had an offer. He knew he was going to commit at the camp, right? That had already been decided. We knew that. Everybody knew that. He comes to the camp and he competes in every single drill. He goes to the entire camp. He played like he was trying to earn a scholarship. Like, seriously, this is a highly ranked top 100 caliber kid that played at that camp like he was trying to earn a Notre Dame scholarship. He'd already had one. He was going to commit. They already knew he was going to commit. It was all set up.
Yeah.
And that, I think, tells you everything you need to know about Gabriel Rubio. It would be so easy for a kid like that. He goes to a good private school. His dad's a former NFL player. He already had a Notre Dame offer.
Right.
He was already highly ranked. He had no reason to come to that camp and compete. And yet not only did he come and compete, he balled. I mean, he was the best guy there. And there was other D1 guys there. And I think that's what you see from Gabriel Rubio. He plays hungry. He doesn't have to, but he plays hungry. He's mean. He plays mean. He's a great kid off the field, like really nice kid off the field. But on the field, there's a switch that goes on, and he's mean. He's a bully, and I mean those in good ways. Strong kid, very powerful hands, advanced technique, really good vertical speed. He's not a real great sideline to sideline speed kind of guy, but vertical speed is very good. He's disruptive. His numbers as a junior in high school were something. He had over 100 tackles, over 40 tackles for loss, and like 17 sacks. It's just absurd numbers.
Yeah.
His senior season was cut short. Missouri didn't play a full season, and then he had just a couple little dings here that kept him out of a couple games. But just a really talented player. He's one of the few players in this defensive class that you're like, yeah, he'll have a chance to play right away. It'll be hard for him to play right away because it's a loaded defensive.
I was going to say, and it's more of the depth chart situation,
right?
As opposed to him being any good.
Knowing Gabriel and the fact that he's an early enrollee, it's gonna be hard to keep him off the field because he's 6'5", he's 290, he's a quality athlete, and he's hungry. And that's the thing is he's going to be hard to keep off the field some way somehow, and he's not a 5-year player most likely, so there's no reason not to at least get him some snaps each week. Find a role for him and allow him to just continue to develop as a player.
Well, let's talk Jasonogne. He's a defensive end out of Rhode Island, I do believe.
Now, this is one of my favorite kids in the class. So he ranks 6th in this defensive class overall. But when you look at the upside grade, and I have a breakdown I have an article at irishbreakdown.com today where I go through and I kind of rank the players, and he ranks 6th overall in the class. But then at the bottom, I have an upside ranking, which is basically just if everybody pans out, here's where they rank, and he's 4th.
Okay.
Because he is a very intriguing player. He's listed at 6'5", 245, but according to the source that I have, he's already up to 260. He's a big, strong, long kid. Here's the interesting thing. He went to Bishop Hendricken in Rhode Island to play basketball.
Okay.
He didn't start playing football until his sophomore year. So he's only played 2 years of football because Rhode Island didn't have football this year. In his second year of football, despite really not knowing how to play the game, he had 17 sacks. Like, this is a talented kid, big, strong, physical kid. And he's one of the kids in the class, Vince, that when you look at him, you say, you have to be able to watch. You can't just watch his highlights. You have to watch everything you can, because there's a lot of snaps that you're going to look at and say, boy, that wasn't overly impressive. But you have to remember, this is a kid that just now is starting to play football. You have to find those snaps where, like, he does it the way you're supposed to do it. And when he keeps his pads low and comes off with good leverage, he explodes off the ball. He's got incredibly long arms. He's actually well coached considering his lack of experience. So I think he's a coachable kid. But there's kids never played football before. There's only so much you can teach him in 2 years,
Right.
But he has a tremendous ceiling. He's a power end. He's going to be 260, 275. He's a power end. He's got Khalid Kareem and Adi Takumba Ogundeji have had two of the longest wingspans that we've seen at the combines and the Senior Bowls the last 2 years. Jasonogne is going to be just like that, incredibly wide wingspan, and he's everything that Mike Elston loves. I mean, that's just the kind of guy Mike Elston loves: raw, big ball of clay, but a very talented ball of clay. And if the light goes on, he's got a chance to someday down the road. He's probably not a guy that's going to help you in 2021. But 2022, 2023, we might start seeing him, and he's a guy that's got a chance to be a really impactful player. The other thing, too, about him, Vince, is I actually think he's one of the players that's going to benefit from Marcus Freeman coming in. And what I mean by that is he's kind of got that body where if he is that 275 that I think he can get to, he's a guy that can play that power end spot, but then easily shift inside and become a disruptive 3 technique when they go to their 4-man looks. So if they're in a base 3 down, he's a power end. But if they want to go 3rd down, if they want to kind of do some different looks where they're in their 3-3-5 stack look and they want to walk one of the linebackers up, he can slide inside, and he's big and powerful enough to play over the guard occasionally. Not something you want to do all the time, but I think this defense is going to better accent his talent and his ability to be a disruptive football player.
So let's talk about Will Schweitzer. He's out of California, I do believe, out of Los Gatos High School. Originally committed to Nebraska, and Notre Dame was able to flip him. Talk about him and maybe some of your concerns about him.
Yeah, so they flipped 2 defensive linemen, which kind of happened because they had a commitment from David Abiara, who today on signing day committed to Texas, but they moved on from him for a lot of different reasons, and they were right to do so. And Will Schweitzer was one of the guys they went after and were able to flip right away. This is an interesting player. He's 6'4". He was about 200 pounds in high school, didn't get a chance to play his senior year. But this is a kid you fall in love with as a recruit because he plays just as much off-ball linebacker as he does coming off the edge. He's very rangy. He's athletic, plays some tight end on offense. Covers, he's a defensive end prospect, but he can cover. He runs. He's a very athletic player. Great burst off the edge. Vince, he's kind of got that skill set as a pass rusher that, some guys just have that natural instinct to kind of dip and rip through or get under the pads of a pass rush or a pass blocker. And he shows that on film. He just has to fill out. He's like 200 pounds, 210 to 215 pounds maybe is what he's gotten up to, but he's still a skinny kid. But he's got so much athleticism. He's got so much length. The question is how much weight can he put on and still maintain that athleticism? And that's where we get into that low floor, high ceiling thing. The floor is low because some guys at his size, when they get up to 250, they lose some of that burst and some of that explosiveness. If he is one of those guys, and then he's not going to be the recruit that I think he can be. However, if he can get up to 240 plus, get up to 240, 250, maintain his explosiveness, become more powerful, then he's got a chance to be a really good football player. And he's a perfect example of what Mike Elston loves to go out and recruit, which is that not that high upside or that high ceiling or high floor, highly ranked guy that's going to come in with some attitude. It's these raw, overlooked, athletic, long guys that maybe people don't know as much about. And they've made a killing with guys like that. And Will Schweitzer's just like that. He to me, Vince, is a guy that is perfect for that drop end position that Notre Dame used to have, that they used to use. My only question about him at this point in time beyond the weight is what role will he have in the new defense? And if they are going to look for if they want to have more flexibility where they kind of go down with 4 down personnel, but have that drop end guy be athletic enough to play off the ball, to play in the slot, then Will Schweitzer's perfect for that. He would be great at that. And then you can easily just then put his, hand in the ground and have him come off the edge. So depending on what Marcus Freeman does with his defense, I think Schweitzer's another guy that could end up being better in this defense than even more so than he would have in the previous defense. But again, it's just we have to wait and see what Marcus Freeman does. But either way, this is a talented, athletic kid that's got a very high ceiling and has a chance in time. He's going to need at least a year, potentially 2, just to get up to the size that you're going to need to play this level. But there's a lot of talent, and they don't need him to play earlier. They've got Foskey, they've got Jordan Patelho, they've got plenty of guys that can play that position. These next couple of years, they don't necessarily need him to be able to play right away.
Another kid out of California, Oxnard Pacifica. Another guy they flipped, as you had mentioned, from UCLA, and I'm going to mess this up. I think it's Devin Uipui.
Yeah, I've heard it said different ways. I've heard it said Uapau is what I've also heard it said that way.
That better.
Yeah. It has a better ring to it.
Yeah.
Another flip candidate, another guy that got late in the process, talented player. He, to me, is a little bit more projection even than Schweitzer, because with Schweitzer, the athleticism is there. The playmaking is there. It's just, can he fill out the frame? Like, he doesn't need to really develop his game beyond what a normal high school kid needs to develop his game moving forward. With Devin, there's more projection there. There's more work needed.
Yeah.
He doesn't always come off the line with the same burst. You have to kind of search for those clips where he has that burst. But what he does have is, again, it's what Mike Elson loves. He's long and he's rangy and he's got some punch in his hands. His frame is such that he's 225 now. So he's kind of got the body of a drop end, a weak side end kind of guy. But when I look at him though, Vince, you can see this in photos, you see it on film. He's really long. He's got big feet, big hands. He looks like a guy that to me is going to hit a growth spurt again here in college and blow up and become a guy that you're going to end up moving to strong side.
I'll take that.
So that's kind of how I see it. But it's, again, there's a lot more projection with Devin. That's why his upside is a little lower on my board than some of the other ends. He's the guy that I have as the lowest rank from an upside standpoint, just because I'm less certain that he's going to be able to fully tap into everything he has. But, big, powerful hands, long arms, good athlete, not a necessarily overly explosive athlete, but he's got, good flexibility, good range. Good closing speed. He just has to really improve that initial step. And part of that is because I think a technique thing comes off high. He lifts up instead of getting vertical, doesn't keep his pads low, but he doesn't play high because he lacks the athleticism to bend. He just plays high because he has technique that needs to be improved. He's another guy too that missed out on a chance to make the improvements to be a senior. And that's the thing you all have to consider as we're breaking this film down and we're breaking these kids down is there's a lot of kids in this class that had their senior seasons canceled. So the normal projection we might have seen from some of these guys as seniors, we didn't get a chance to see. And that's usually where a lot of these kids make their big jumps. I mean, most kids make pretty good jumps from their junior to senior year. And there's a lot of kids in this class that didn't get a chance to do that because there's a lot of these kids in the class that are either from the Northeast or they're from the West Coast. And so a lot of those states just didn't have football this year. So we just got done talking about 4 Notre Dame defensive ends and only one of them, or defensive linemen, and only one of them got to play his senior year. So I think that's something else that excites me about this group is all the film we're watching these ends is all junior film.
Yeah, right.
And so what would we be saying about this class if we got a chance to see their maturity as seniors?
Yeah.
We'd be even more excited about it.
I've coached high school football for 15 years. The difference between juniors and seniors, even from a physical standpoint, is immense. And you're talking from a mental maturity standpoint, knowledge of the game, all these different things just escalates from junior to senior year. So yeah, you're right. Not having senior year film is definitely hurts these guys, at least from an evaluation standpoint. Now they were doing stuff off to the side, but we weren't there. We didn't see
what they weren't at camps. I mean, a lot of that stuff was shut down. So it's not that they haven't been working, but we didn't get a chance to see them play. And so that's also something that kind of excites me a little bit about this class, because I got to remind myself, hey, this isn't senior film. This isn't senior film, right? But that's the part of the exciting thing about this defensive line class, especially, is these guys are all players that I needed their senior years to kind of make that statement. But then you also have to ask yourself, if they had senior years, there might have been a lot of work needed by the Notre Dame defensive staff to keep these guys, which then would have led to, when Clark Lee left, potentially losing some more of them.
Sure.
Because look what happened with Prince Colley. And we'll get to this when we talk about linebacker, but he was a guy that when Notre Dame signed him, there were not many of the big schools were after him. When Notre Dame got a commitment from him, he was a 3-star recruit. Nobody really knew about him. Notre Dame kind of identified him. And then he goes out as a senior and as a running back rushes for over 1,900 yards. As a linebacker has over 100 tackles, double-digit tackles for loss, and was SI All-American, named him a first-team All-American. And again, we'll dive into him in a minute. I'm trying to make a different point. And all of a sudden, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, LSU, all these schools are trying to flip him. And Notre Dame had to hold on to him. They almost lost him after Clark Lee left. Well, there's a lot of guys in this class, that Ryan Barnes, Will Schweitzer, Jasonogne, that if they would have gone out and had senior seasons and had the kind of growth that I think they would have had, you'd had a lot more schools maybe trying to work to flip these kids. So I think in some ways it benefited Notre Dame from a recruiting standpoint, although it did hinder the kids' ability to go out there and just get that extra year of seasoning. And a guy like Onye especially really could have benefited from that third season, because I think he would have blown up as a senior, because as more people got a chance to look at him and see, like, wow, this kid's a legit 250, 6'5", long arms, powerful, athletic. Because again, he went there to play basketball. He's a basketball player. So he's got those basketball player feet. And he's a guy, like I said, Vince, that's got a chance to be really special. And that's what I feel about this whole class. It may end up being just kind of an average class, and that's the low floor part of it. But if even two of those ends pan out, this is going to be a really, really good defensive line class.